Hi, everybody. My name is Carla, and I'm an alcoholic. And Amanda, thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. And not that it makes me feel pressured or anything now, but but and earlier in this particular chapter, it says to cling to the thought that in God's hands our dark past is the greatest possession that we have, and so it's always it always comes home to me to find out that something I might have been through and got to share connected with someone else, as I connected with people who shared when I got here, and we continue to do that, and it knits us all closer together and encourages us to keep going, and so that's just another wave of that. Thank God, and thank you for that. My sobriety date is September 25th, 1987. I'm delighted to be here with you guys tonight, although it is, I have to admit, a little past my bedtime. I'm an early riser, and but so far so good. If I nod off, it's just because it's late. It's nothing else. Thank God, I didn't come to today. I woke up, and and I hope I never take that for granted. So I guess I'm going to try to get right into this. I'm going to try to get to the end of the chapter. I know you guys have been doing this particular chapter for a little while. It is rich, it is rich. And I got sober with my daughter. I got sober on the heels of my husband and I mean, our marriage was hanging by a thread anyway. There was really no marriage left. We were together kind of surviving. And the way we settled our arguments was with a shotgun. That's how we rolled. And so we had one more of those Saturday afternoons where everything blew up, and the gun was out, and the neighbors were watching, and the kid who I had lost at one point for about 4.5 years, and then I'd gotten her back and had her for maybe almost 2 years, or about 2 years. And anyway, the whole mess is out on the sidewalk for all the world to see. And again, this is not my worst bottom, but it's again. And so I had this. Some people come into AA and they get sober and then they have a family. I brought mine, what was left of it, with me, and I weighed 110 pounds. I'm almost 6 feet tall. I was in really poor health. I felt like if you blew on me, I would turn to dust. And, for all the trouble that it caused, and for this relationship that now I had with alcohol that was so intertwined, I could not control the amount of alcohol I drank, and I could not stop going back to pick it up and take another one. I couldn't. And so all this is swirling around. I came in very poor health, mentally, physically, and certainly spiritually. So we're starting here at the bottom of page 132. Everybody knows that those in bad health and those who seldom play do not laugh much. And I think there's a part earlier in the chapter too where it says we insist on enjoying life, or we're not a glum lot. And I got to tell you, when I got here, I didn't care if you were a glum lot or not. I didn't care about going to a dance. I didn't care. I wanted to. I just wanted to stop the madness. I didn't know what to expect. I just wanted to stop the madness, and so I wasn't insisting on enjoying life, but it was nice to know that somebody was, and that there was a little bit of hope. But anyway, so he's coming into this chapter talking about, our health. So let each family play together or separately as much as their circumstances warrant. And I just read that, addressing it, meeting us, any of us, where we are. Like I said, I had my daughter. Every day that in my first year of sobriety, even every day I had just enough hope. I had a lot of misery, and I was, I felt very sorry for myself. I was very fragile and feeling very sorry for myself. My goal was to get my daughter up through high school, and then I could die. That was I'm not being dramatic. I'm just saying that's how I felt. And And so I didn't really know what to expect, except that every meeting I went to, every person I talked to, I had enough hope to get me through another day. So it says, it's meeting us where we are. I wasn't having a bunch of fun, but I had some hope. We are sure God wants us to be happy, joyous, and free. We cannot subscribe to the belief that this life is a vale of tears, though it was once just that for many of us, possibly for most of us. But it is clear that we made our own misery. God didn't do it. Avoid, then, the deliberate manufacture of misery. But if trouble comes, cheerfully capitalize it as an opportunity to demonstrate his omnipotence. And there's a lot there in that paragraph. Like I said, my daughter was almost 10 when I got sober, and we were just going around and around. And I had hope, but fun for me was learning that I could show up for work 2 days, 3 days, 5 days in a row, paying rent for more than a month in a row. That was, I'm the kind of a drunk who used to sleep by the side of the road and call it camping, so learning. And I lost my daughter. I have to tell this story just to appreciate, where this brought me. I lost my daughter one day when she was almost 4 years old, as going to work, where I worked at the bar, and I got thirsty, stopped at the bar on the way to the bar, had a couple drinks, and on that particular day could not stop. I couldn't stop long enough to get up and go see her, take care of business at the bar where I worked, where there was no trouble. I loved going to that place. I loved where I worked. There was one of my favorite stories in the book is about Fred the accountant, who wasn't having a bad day when he was drinking. He wasn't full of drama and trauma and a bad childhood or anything like that. He just started to drink. He said, I think I have a highball, and so he drank a highball, and then he couldn't stop. And so I sat on that bar stool that afternoon and could not get up. The love of my daughter was not enough to get me up off that bar stool to go home and take care of her either. And so I lost her for about 4.5 years. And so when I went on that Saturday afternoon, when my life was blowing up one more time, and we were really trying, this was like alcoholism when we're younger and we're blowing through, we're blasting, partying, and setting out to get crazy. And, my alcoholism wasn't an ego trip. It wasn't like I wanted to see, after a while, it wasn't I wanted to see how I could outdrink everybody. Alcoholism was happening to me as I was developing this relationship with alcohol. At the end, when my drinking had been scaring everybody else for years, it was beginning to scare me. And you can't talk to people who are already scared of your drinking about how scared you're getting of your drink. At least I couldn't, because then they're going to tell you something stupid like, why don't you stop drinking? If it scares you like that, why don't you stop? Like, what am I going to do with that? So I'm secretly scared, and my life is blowing up no matter how hard I try. And no matter how much my life was blowing up, I couldn't stop picking up that first drink. And it was a whirlpool. It was a whirlpool, and somewhere inside me shouting, "This is not me. This is not where I meant to come. This is not where I meant to be." I became a liar, a cheat, and a thief, and it's not that I can't be selfish or self-seeking or any of those things. Stone cold sober. That's right. But I want to say this. I became the worst kind of liar, cheat, and thief when I was drinking. I'd lie to you, I'd lie to the people I loved, knowing full well I was lying to them as I was doing it, and my heart would break as it was happening, and I still had to do it. And I want to say this, that as we recover, as we regain our spiritual, mental, physical health, we are no longer liars, cheats, and thieves. I mean, unless, then fear kicks in. And sometimes I lie because I'm afraid. I'm dishonest because I'm afraid, or selfish because I'm afraid. But not like that. You know, when I got to AA, you couldn't use the words Carla and good character in the same sentence. And we recover from that. We can recover from that. We get better. There is nothing but hope in this book. And I want to be sure to say that, because there's sometimes that we get a little bit, you know, we don't have to get well overnight, which is a big relief for me. You know, I didn't have to get, but there is hope. I'm 34 years sober and crazy like I was when I was new. I want you to hear that. I needed to see that people could take cakes for 22 years. That was the first cake I saw somebody take when I was new. 22 years. They turned off the lights and it lit up the room. This thing works. And if I'm willing, like it says in your reading, if I'm willing to make the effort, but I've got to be in here too. And it doesn't mean it's always going to be comfortable, but we get better. Here we're talking about our overall health, and we're going to get into this. I hope, good Lord, I hope. But you know, as we read in the steps earlier, as we came through in our 11th step experience, it says there in our book that we come to rely on our intuition. In step 10, it says our thinking is on a different plane. So our mental health comes back too. We're not running around like sometimes I think alcoholism becomes a superstition in a way. You know, we think of it in a superstitious way, like, oh, it's chasing me around. It doesn't have to. If I'm willing to make the effort and do this work, I recover, I get better. So anyway, and I love that it says, God didn't make my misery. You know, and that doesn't mean that life isn't going to happen to me. Life happened to me in sobriety. My daughter, when she was 11 years old, she was she needed treatment. She was drinking, using. She'd been jumped into a gang. She was out there running and gunning. 18-year-old vatos are crawling in and out of her bedroom window. She's 11, you know, and I'm getting calls from the police department at work, you know, and here I am, you know, good Lord, and I'm not above saying it. When I was new, I was like, I didn't get sober for this. Can you imagine I said that? You know, now my daughter's going through the same thing that I went through, but now all of a sudden, I can't take it. But the initial shock of that kind of thing was temporary, and then I went into, what do I do now? It wasn't, I need a drink about this. It was, now, how do I handle this? And then I found the treatment center for her. We and my people in my home group tried to help with this, and then we realized she needed bigger help. And so I found a treatment center for her. And she was in that treatment center for 6 months. You know, so both of us were growing up together. It took from the time she was 11 till she was 23 to before we finally found some even keel with each other. And a lot happened in that. So maybe when the trouble came, I didn't cheerfully capitalize on it immediately, you know. I knew there was hope, but I didn't say yippee. But I did. But hear this, the thought that I needed to drink about it wasn't there. That you know, I may not have been laughing down the street, but the thought that I needed to drink about it wasn't there. It was, what do I do now? How do I handle this? How do I become the kind of a mother that I always wanted to be in her years 1 through 10? You know, how do I do that now? And so then I got to show up at her, you know, what does a recovered mother look like? She shows up at the treatment center when they ask her to. I go to all of the sessions, all of the events. I went to we're gonna get here to. I'll read it. Now about health. The body badly burned by alcohol does not often recover overnight, nor do twisted thinking and depression vanish in a twinkling. They do vanish, but not in a twinkling. You know, we can come to a place where we are living in a healthy way, where we have a healthy attitude, where instead of thinking, oh, why does the trouble always come my way? I start to ask, what if this goes well? What if this turns out nice? What if this works? You know, so my attitude changes. We are convinced that a spiritual mode of living is a most powerful health restorative. Absolutely. What does it say earlier in the chapter in the words on the fourth step? When the spiritual malady is treated, we recover bodily and mentally, something like that. You got to read the book. You got to read your own book, because I just paraphrased that in a very bad way. But the spiritual mode of living is the most powerful health restorative. We who have recovered from serious drinking are miracles of mental health, but we have seen remarkable transformations in our bodies. Hardly one of our crowd now shows any mark of dissipation. And that's true for me. I really recovered. My body was very forgiving. You know, I smoked cigarettes for the first 2 years of my sobriety, and then I haven't had a cigarette in 32 years either now. But I recovered. I know that there are people whose livers, you know, they've needed liver transplants and all of that kind of stuff too. But the difference is that the attitude toward that is, you know, hey, I did that. I've got bad teeth because I did some other, you know, I loved crank, you know, and I know that sooner or later I'm going to be paying the price for that too. And so I can take responsibility for that. When I can take responsibility for my own actions, then it kind of takes the sting out of the resentment, and I feel a little less sorry for myself about that. You know, and listen, I'm somebody who used to like play those sad songs over and over and over again. You know, I just thought that that's what we do, is sink down into the mire of a good old, you know, horrible sad song. Here I sit again and mixing misery and gin, you know, Merle Haggard at the bar. But my attitude has changed, starting with the spiritual, with spiritual principles, and then my mental and physical health has also come around. But this does not mean that we disregard human health measures. God has abundantly supplied this world with fine doctors, psychologists, and practitioners of various kinds. Do not hesitate to take your health problems to such persons. When my daughter was in treatment, I went to a therapist as well, not for my alcoholism, but because I needed some help with my parenting. I didn't have my childhood was pretty violent. There was a lot of, you know, molestation and all that kind of stuff. That's not, you know, typical to every alcoholic, but some of us have that. And so I needed some outside help. I went to a therapist when I was 2 years sober to help my daughter. And actually he turned me on to another spiritual tradition. So an additional one, not instead of AA, but in addition to this. It was a great 11-step practice. And so that helped a lot. And what his motto was is that he wanted patients or clients so that his goal was to get rid of them, not to keep them, not to collect them, but to get rid of them, which was a good. So it says, most of them give freely of themselves, that their fellows may enjoy sound minds and bodies. That people dedicate their lives. They went to school to go do this, to learn how to do this. So, and they're not perfect, but they earned licenses to practice. And so they do this for a living because most of them care. Try to remember that though God has wrought miracles among us, we should never belittle a good doctor or psychiatrist. Their services are often indispensable in treating a newcomer and in following his case afterward. And I have to tell you too, you know, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in AA that we all talk about because of our own personal experiences, and I was one of them. When I got here, I didn't want to have anything to do with any kind of medications, any kind of psychiatric thing, simply because I had been locked up when I was a kid, and I felt like a giant experiment. And I know that they all meant well, but I know for me, by the time I got here, and my own, you know, experiments in better living through chemistry, and then pouring alcohol, you know, through that, which incidentally for me, I didn't do drugs for the last 2 years before I got sober. I drank my way all the way through all of those things and seemed to be able to walk away from them. But then when I got to AA, I just didn't want to take anything. I didn't, I took the advice of the books. We're not doctors, or the pamphlet that says we're not doctors, and so I didn't impose my views on anybody else for a while. There was a little time in my early teens in sobriety where I got very, very scared, and I thought I was doing people a disservice by I belittled doctors a little bit. I belittled the psychiatric approach a little bit. I was scared. But what I learned through that is that I have to allow others the same thing I was allowed, even though I did mine before I got to AA, to find their way. I don't know. There are illnesses that are way beyond alcoholism that need to be treated with medication. And we need to stay out of that, because I got to tell you something. I don't have a 9th grade education, so I don't need to be out there prescribing or unprescribing medication for people. And the rough thing is that the psychiatric world is so vast, and there are so many problems that just seem to even be getting away from them. They don't need my help with that. All I need to do is present what I know, how I know Alcoholics Anonymous works, start from there, and then if there's still a mental illness that's apparent in somebody, I go to the doctor with them if they want me to. I will, I am all for it. But I have to say that I can't in good conscience not mention that out of fear, for a while, I kept my hands off that. So their services are often indispensable in treating a newcomer and in following his case afterward. And again, most of these people really, really care. One of the many doctors who had the opportunity of reading this book in manuscript form told us that the use of sweets was often helpful, and of course, depending upon a doctor's advice. He thought all alcoholics should constantly have chocolate available for its quick energy value at times of fatigue. He added that occasionally in the night a vague craving arose, which would be satisfied by candy. Many of us have noticed a tendency to eat sweets and have found this practice beneficial. Well, that's another paragraph that I have to say. First of all, when I got here, I've never been a big sweets person, but I know that, the way that we process sugar, and some people I noticed that got sober with me gained like 100 pounds in their first year. That suggestion is not for everybody, and we need to take it with a grain of salt. We need to take it in stride. If you find yourself, chomping on, 10 candy bars a night, I think maybe it's possible that we have found ourselves another distraction, if not another addiction, or potential. So, we need to be careful. That's all I'm going to say about that. A word about sex relations. Alcohol is so sexually stimulating to some men that they have overindulged. Couples are occasionally dismayed to find that when drinking is stopped, the man tends to be impotent. Unless the reason is understood, there may be an emotional upset. Some of us have had this experience only to enjoy in a few months a finer intimacy than ever. There should be no hesitancy in consulting a doctor or a psychologist if the condition persists. We do not know of many cases where this difficulty has lasted long. And, I don't have that experience. I didn't get sober with a partner, but I know that for me, not only physically, and, my libido wasn't terribly active, but my ideas about sex and of course, through the process of the inventory and everything, there was a lot of growth and a lot of change. And so we're waking up in that area too. And if it's revealed, and I know that people, not just alcoholics, but everybody, grows up with some kind of hang up, depending on where you're from and what the culture was. And in your area, and so all of that stuff begins to bubble up to the top. And I got to tell you something. The inventory process and getting sober helped me so much with shedding the shame and getting new ideas about myself. I mean, I was molested by a family member at first, and then assaulted by some kids at school, and then it was the 60s, and so there was a lot of that sexual freedom and unfreedom, cultures colliding, and I ended up, when I was 14 years old, I was turning tricks in San Francisco, to make a living, and it wasn't my idea of who I wanted to be when I grew up, but that's where I ended up, and so I had a lot to come back from when I got sober. And listen, I'm not against sex or even sex for money. If it's working for you, that's great. It wasn't working for me, and it wasn't where I had intended to go. So, I'm not even making a judgment on that. Some people put themselves through school. They knew who they were. They were able to, move right through that. I had some unpacking to do in that area. And so even though this paragraph doesn't really directly relate to me in that particular experience in verbatim, we do begin to wake up and welcome it, welcome whatever's happening. The alcoholic may find it hard to reestablish friendly relations with his children or her children. Their young minds were impressionable while he was drinking. Without saying so, they may cordially hate him for what he has done to them and to their mother. The children are sometimes dominated by a pathetic hardness and cynicism. They cannot seem to forgive and forget. This may hang on for months, long after their mother had accepted Dad's new way of living and thinking. I'll read the next one too. It goes together. In time, they will see that he is a new man, and in their own way, they will let him know it. When this happens, they can be invited to join in morning meditation, and they can take part in the daily discussion without rancor or bias. From that point on, progress will be rapid. Marvelous results will often follow such a reunion. I want to keep track of the time here too. I told you, my daughter and I were like 2 steps forward, 1 back, 1 forward, 2 back, and it took some time, and we, slowly we knitted ourselves together, and she went to treatment, and I had to listen to letters that she wrote about the things she hated about me, and then the next time was listening to a letter about how things she loved about me, and slowly but surely we came together. When she was 16, she was living with me again, and we found out she was pregnant, and instead of having to have this big blow up and kind of weird thing happen in the family, certainly we were a little bit nervous about it, but I got to tell her, look, whatever you decide, I'm there. And so we went through the whole deal together, and I got to be present at the birth of my first grandson. And that kid just started his new job as an attorney just a couple of months ago. So he grew up, and the younger one, he is all grown up now too. He's working, and he'll be 21 in December, and she's been through her own particular kind of hell. And to fast forward, she ended up putting herself through school, getting her master's degree, and became a social worker. And she's out there, in the thick of it. She became a social worker on the crisis impact team with the police department, and she's being useful. And because of AA, I get to be a witness to that. We never found. I didn't. Oh, thank you. We didn't. I didn't put a lot of pressure on her one way or another to try to guide her in any kind of religious way. I was freely talked about the steps. I freely invited her. She came to tons of meetings with me, and was part of that fellowship. But I let her. I was pretty loosely gripped trying to guide her in any one way. I didn't want to be guided when I was a kid, and I felt like I needed to allow her that. I know that it's different for everybody, but she's found her own way. She has her own spiritual practice, and she's grown up now, and has a pretty good attitude about life. We were just all together for my father's 87th birthday on Sunday, and I'm the matriarch of the family now. And who knew I'd be the one that they were calling. Whether the family goes on a spiritual basis or not, the alcoholic member has to if he would recover. The others must be convinced of his new status beyond the shadow of a doubt. Seeing is believing to most families who have lived with a drinker. And I have to say, my daughter, she's the first call or text I get on my sobriety date, still all these years later. And that means the world to me. And she has seen the change. And, her dad, who, never was able to stop drinking, and he was a violent, and now he's got liver trouble, as we do if we don't stop. And like early on, I made my amends to him, and then we had a lot of follow through, and there was some contention there and stuff, but there was change, and so much so that when I went to the baby shower that they had at their house for my daughter's second child, her stepmother, his wife, followed me out to my car because she had a problem with drugs and alcohol as well, and she followed me out to the car and asked me if I'd take her to some meetings. She said, "I know it's worked for you. Will you take me to some meetings?" And she never, then after I called to follow up to find out if she wanted to go with me, she never did. But when she sobered up, but the proof was there to me. There's no better example or a statement of something than for her to have asked me if I would. And so that, that was seen. And so the people who saw me were like my father, who had to tell me this story till I was like 12 years sober. He had to tell me the story about how he used to sit up nights watching the news, and if they found an unidentified female body, he couldn't allow himself to sleep until they identified it. And he had to tell me that story, for about 12 years. Not like all the time, but every once in a while, here it would come, And I think, Jesus, isn't there like a statute of limitations or something for the amount of time? But, for those 12 years, there were many more years before that where he didn't know where he actually lived that. This was only in the telling. All I had to do was listen to the retelling of it. He actually lived that, not knowing where his daughter was so much of the time, wondering if some serial killer, it was the days when, the hillside strangler and the night crawler or whoever, the night stalker was out, and he didn't know. So here's a case in point, and I love this story. One of our friends is a heavy smoker and coffee drinker. There was no doubt he overindulged. Seeing this and meaning to be helpful, his wife commenced to admonish him about it. And I want to say one thing about that too. This goes back to the paragraph before, whether the family goes on a spiritual basis or not. I have a little note of saying my way, my spiritual basis, because I hear when we get sober, first we come to AA and like most of us don't want, either if there is a God, we don't want him to find us, we don't believe in him anymore, we don't like him, good Lord, nothing. And then 3 months into sobriety, we're like, too bad they don't have what we have. We're so much better than everybody else now. Not true. Lots of people have been practicing spiritual principles before we ever woke up. So it's not about whether they do it my way or not. And so anyway, they're talking about this guy. Seeing this and meaning to be helpful, his wife commenced to admonish him about it in that self-righteous way that is so charming, right? He admitted he was overdoing these things, but frankly said that he was not ready to stop. And that's fair, right? I'm not ready. And that's the truth. His wife is one of those persons who really feels there is something rather sinful about these commodities, so she nagged, and her intolerance finally threw him into a fit of anger. He got drunk. Our friend was wrong, dead wrong. He had to painfully admit that and mend his spiritual fences. Though he is now a most effective member of Alcoholics Anonymous, he still smokes and drinks coffee. But neither his wife nor anyone else stands in judgment. She sees she was wrong to make a burning issue out of such a matter when his more serious ailments were being rapidly cured. We have 3 little mottos which are apropos. Here they are. First things first, live and let live, and easy does it. And my little story about that was when early on, I don't know, maybe I was 60 or 90 days in, and my daughter and I were having a fight. You know, it was like me as a 14-year-old, 29-year-old, arguing with my 10-year-old, and I decided to play the drink card. I said, well, maybe I'll just go drink, you know. So that's real mature. And she looked at me. She'd never had any Al-Anon or Alateen or anything. She said, well, then drink, you know. So it kind of took the wind out of my sails, you know. I don't know how she, you know, found that kind of, but knew that to say that. But it was like, wait a minute, that's back on you. And it stopped me in my tracks. I don't get to do that. And so, but I love this story, you know, like as soon as that thing that happens to human beings, that as soon as we learn something, then everybody else has got to learn it too, right? And it's like, no, I had my chance to learn it. And now I got to give, I might offer some information, I might offer some hope, you know, but if it's asked for, you know, it's always nice to be asked for it. And then I got to leave it alone. And what is this? Live and let live. First things first for me, live and let live for them. Doesn't it say that back in there as a solution? We feel that real tolerance of other people's viewpoints is top on the charts. I'm not going to be able to find it fast enough to read it to you, but you know, way back then it gets us started thinking, let them be them, you take care of you, you know, I got to be responsible for me. You are none of my business. Whoa. And then easy does it. And one of my favorite sayings hanging on the inside of an AA room has always been, easy does it, but do it. You know, you know, don't rest on my laurels, but I don't have to be, you know, this is a marathon, not a sprint. So somewhere in there, I hope that you found some hope. You know, I think my whole point is life is messy. You know, life is messy for every human being. We're coming in, way behind the 8 ball. And if I stay consistent, I do this beautiful miracle has happened and trickled through my family. It took me 21 years to meet and marry the love of my life. I was 21 years sober when we got together. So, you know, I took a lot of work, but and you know, it's different for everybody. I'm glad that I wasn't with the wrong one when the right one came along, though. So in the meantime, we have the fellowship, we got the steps, and we've got, you know, that's so far been enough for me. Anyway, that's enough out of me. I really want to hear what you guys have to share. Thanks.